Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to speak about something very interesting, something that I get a lot of questions about. So make sure you watch till the end because it's gonna get a little triggering and intense. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. Hello and welcome, I'm Charlie Wild, and in this channel we speak about spirituality and anything that has to do with this awakening and ascension that planet Earth is going through right now. I'm often asked, who are they? This deep state, this cabal, these people who control human consciousness, or the reptilians as many people know them. Now, of course, there is the overall who they are in terms of the humans that we see on this planet. And there's lots of names that will pop up, right? And I won't go into those particular names, but I want to go into the spiritual aspect of who these people are. And by people, I mean entities, beings, because some of them are these particular beings, they are shapeshifters. So some of them do take human form, and some of them just utilize humans. I'm sure you've heard of the term selling the soul to the devil. And what this really means, there's a lot of truth in it, because what happens is in this 3D reality that we all share, in this like pyramid structured reality, in order to gain power, for a lot of people, they must sell their soul to the devil, meaning they must give their sort of whole being over to these entities so that these entities work through these humans. And what the humans get in return is power, fame, money. And what these entities get in return is food. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by this food? Food as in these entities that live in the lower fourth dimensional level, they feed on negative emotions. And it sounds weird and twisted, but let's just give this a little bit of time and I'll delve a little bit deeper. What do I mean by this? You might have noticed in your own life, sometimes you get on a negative train of thought and you just keep on going and going and going. By the end of it, you feel exhausted, bitter, angry, and one negative thing after another negative thing happens. It just doesn't lead anywhere good, right? However, once we recognize our negative emotions and the messages they are sending us, and we come from a space of, all right, this is what's happening, I understand, I might be suffering right now, but it's not my destiny per se. It is, I must work through this, and there are lots of guides and teachers that help us in this process. However, when we get stuck, we call it getting stuck in a rut, and it happens to all of us. It's like, as my twin flame puts it, it's like our stomach creates this bacteria, right? Depending on what we eat. And so this bacteria craves more of the same food, which is why if, let's say, we get used to eating, carbs and pasta all the time, the body just craves it a lot. And that's what happens with our negative emotions. If we keep feeding these negative emotions, the body just wants more and more and more. We become addicted. But this is not all. There are beings that feed on this negative emotion, and that's who these beings are. And they just love it when planet Earth is in a state of turmoil and war and suffering. And before I go any further, it's not about putting blame on these beings, okay? It is, as I'm going to go back to this, the most important thing is for us to start taking self-responsibility. But it is important to realize that these beings work very, very hard to make sure to keep planet Earth's frequency suppressed so that we can create more food. Now you might think, why would they do this? And this is so evil. The thing is, you and I, we eat food, right? Whether you're a meat eater or not, we're always consuming food coming from different sources. And in the same way, these beings, this is the food sources. Our negative emotions are a food source for them. But if, let's say, we learn how to manage our emotions, right? And we learn how to lift ourselves up by not denying or turning away from our negative emotions, but really doing the inner work the inner work, the real inner work, to understand their messages, to work through our traumas, then we are not stuck in these negative places, okay? And we are able to develop the tools within ourselves to move emotionally in a healthy direction. And so this is a big threat for these beings. So they've made sure to utilize different human beings on this planet. And these are people that rule basically all the different systems that we're part of, whether it's the healthcare system, pharmaceutical system is part of that as well, the education system, the banking, of course, is a massive one, right? And all these systems, even though there are different things that we need from our environment, like food and medicine and all this, there's a much better way to do everything. But these systems are set up in place that they always fall short. And they fall short because when they don't function properly, we suffer in this process, right? Like modern medicine, while it does offer us a lot of good things, it also offers us very dangerous medicines that are not necessarily helping us, right? And there is very little homeopathic medicine that is applied into most people's health issues nowadays, right? And this system was by design, okay? And the design, unfortunately, is fueled by evil and malice. And this can be hard to swallow, a hard pill to swallow, especially I know for a lot of people, even in the spiritual community that do live in this spiritual bypassing, that do consider themselves light workers. They have this tendency to say, no, everything's all right. Everything is working according to plan. And yes, there is a divine design in place, absolutely. However, we must all take responsibility for this inner state, okay? Because what happens is these beings, they do work very hard to make sure that they have food, right? But for them, there's no judgment about, like we have a judgment about what they're eating. They just know this is what feeds them, okay? And they will do anything to make sure that they are fed. But for you and I, this is not necessarily serving us. But it is important that we not only take self-responsibility, but realize that it is up to us, every single one of us, to do the work necessary and to recognize them first and foremost, what's happening within us and what's happening without us, and how we are feeding into the matrix. Of course, one of the people that they love to use the most are what we know as psychopaths. A really interesting thing is there was a study that came out that showed that the highest number of psychopaths or people with psychopathic behaviors was concentrated in DC. They measured all the US states plus DC. And of course, they were concentrated in DC, of course, because that's where the main government body is. And there's a lot of psychopaths in the government, in politics, okay? And one interesting thing about psychopaths is that their brain is actually the amygdala part that processes emotions and recognizes emotions in others is actually smaller than the normal people and people who are considered empaths, okay? So when they look at someone in a state of fear, they do not recognize or register this fear, and they do not react to it in the way that probably you and I or an empath would, right? Somebody who's very sensitive, or even a so-called, I hate this word normal, but a normal person would, okay? These are their perfect agents, okay? Because these people will do very evil things, and they'll continue to do it over and over without feeling any remorse for it, okay? And unfortunately, the greatest food for them is this children, okay? And it's really unfortunate, but that's how it is, which is why you'll see even in, unfortunately, the Catholic Church, a lot of the scandals that came out that exposed the abuse that was happening towards the children. And however, another sad thing is that child abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual, is unfortunately prevalent in a lot of families, okay? Because this emotional dis-ease gets passed on from the parent or the caretaker onto the child so that the cycle can continue. And this is perfect for these beings because they can make sure that they always are churning out, just like when we plant every year, all right? Or we have fruit trees that bear fruit every year. In the same way, they want to make sure that they always have food. And so they will work very hard to manipulate not just our psyche, but to utilize all these different entities and people that run these different systems to make sure that we are contained and used and basically slaves, okay? Now, someone asked a great question during a channeling session that I was watching back, and they asked, well, if, Earth is a prison planet, why do these people, they'll also be part of this prison? Well, here's the interesting thing is, yes, they are part of the prison planet, or at least the 3D matrix. Prison. However, they are the wardens, okay? These people that we know of, that, we look at their actions and we're like, why are they doing this? This is, why are most people seeing what these people are doing? Well, they're the wardens, okay? They're the prison wardens, and they're here to sort of watch over us to make sure that we are good little prisoners. Now, before I go any further, I just want to say it doesn't mean that we're all prisoners, okay? It does mean, though, that this prison is very strong, and unless we remain awake, or unless we truly wake up, then we will be part of this prison. And what it is, it's a psychic prison, okay? It's very much a psychic prison. And these beings, they are false gods, okay? This is so important to remember because they've created a system that makes us feel these are the gods. And I was speaking a little bit about the perfect agents for them that they use to control us. And a big one, obviously, that we know of is Hollywood stories, because we're drawn to stories, okay? Because the evolution that each one of us has come to planet Earth to experience unfolds as a story, the heroes and heroines' journey, okay? And so Hollywood, while for a little bit there were some films that came out that had a depth, and they even tried to expose some of these secret societies that are being utilized by these beings to control us, generally Hollywood has descended into this propaganda machine that is being used to control and manipulate our reality. And Disney, anybody? How we must live our lives. And it's quite disheartening, especially now that they're really getting to the children, okay? This is a big one. And as someone who has given birth to a baby girl who's 7 months old now, I think of this a lot because I've traveled and lived in different continents on Earth in the last few years, and it's very interesting to see how this culture is penetrating everywhere. And you really have to be aware and cautious, and not just cautious, but really understand what's happening. And that's why I'm making this video, because I know a lot of you do understand what's happening, but it's important that we speak about it and we address it. I know some of this material is dark, and I know a lot of people want to just, hear the positive message, and we're getting to the positive message because there is light at the end of the tunnel. I promise you. But we need to look at these things first and foremost, right? So here is how they manipulate us, I think, at the core, through this idea of false, of false gods and false idols and false prophets, right? They get us to believe in things that are really appealing to the ego, okay? Now, the interesting thing, ego is part of the mind. The mind is easily manipulated, okay? We know there's, MK Ultra and the CIA, they already know the mind is easily manipulated. That's why, and movies are really good at this. And the way it's done is by hypnotizing us, right? And again, movies are a great way in which we go into this hypnosis, and then messages are being conveyed into our subconscious. And the thing is that the purest aspect of us is our soul, our spirit, right? And this is, our soul is how we connect to the purest of them all, which is source God. However, these beings, they don't want us to connect to that. Okay, they want us to be very much about the ego mind. That's why so many different spiritual practices will speak about transcending the mind or losing the mind. Now, it's not about losing the mind, just like the ego. The ego has a function. It has a function in this 3D reality. Oh, so it's not about, a lot of people say, oh, when I raise my vibration to 5D and I leave 3D, it's not about leaving 3D. There's interesting, awesome, cool things happening in 3D. It is about how we navigate 3D. This is what matters, right? Because there's lots of wonderful things in this 3D physical reality, but it's about transcending the mind, connecting to Source God. So that's where we begin to really receive messages about what's really true, okay? That's why at the end of the day, no matter what teacher or guru you follow, it is about having your own personal connection to God. That's the most important thing, because as you start developing that and your intuition gets stronger, you're able to sniff out these beings, all right? And other people, you're able to see them, because here's the deal. These beings are multi-dimensional beings, all right? They live in parallel realities to us. And most of us, we just see what we see, right? You're seeing me now and this candle or whatever, right? Or what I'm wearing. Now, as we practice our intuition and we practice and we open up our third eye, we start to see layers of reality. And sometimes you might not physically see one of these beings, but you just sense something, okay? Maybe you are in the presence of someone and they're having a fit of rage and you just see them shapeshift, right? You are literally seeing layers of reality and you are seeing these beings come through, okay? So that's why these different spiritual practices were in place, but of course they can be easily hijacked. And that's why the most important connection is the connection that we have ourselves with spirit, okay? And we can do this in different ways. But the most important way is that we do investigate the darker aspects of ourselves, okay? That we heal our inner traumas. I know it sounds so basic and just, basic psychology, but these things are important to do, connecting with our inner child, okay? And some people say, my life was generally pretty good. I wasn't abused that bad. We all have a certain level of trauma because it's not just what came from our parents, but our psyche, the human psyche, has been manipulated for a very, very long time, okay? The pyramids, they're not just these cool structures from 13,000 years ago. The pyramids are there helping maintain this frequency, this grid frequency on planet Earth, okay? And so it is important that we realize that human consciousness and the psyche has been manipulated for a long time. So even though to some degree you might say life is good, but when we are detached from spirit and soul, we are detached from the pure vision that Source God has for us, for planet Earth, for humans, okay? And when we begin to reconnect, we get to see, wow, I am divine, okay? And I don't mean this just in a cheesy way. There is a very human aspect of us that is imperfect, okay? There is an aspect of us that has come here to learn how to emotionally grow. But the trap and what these beings feed on is in us getting stuck in this materialistic, hypnotized, unhappy, woke state. Ooh, okay, I went there. So what do I mean by this? See, these beings, here's a fun trick they play, which is not so fun, is that they want us to be in this state of feeling that we've woken up, but we've woken up in a dream that they have designed for us. This is the so-called being woke, right? And you see this with people around you. They're so vehemently defending something and you're like, yeah, that makes no sense. That's not based on any kind of higher intelligence. It sounds good to the ego, but that's not how it is. And this is another tool that these beings use to keep us in a warring state, okay? men and women warring one another, okay? Like women are a big tool that they use because obviously we are the carriers of the next generation of life. And so we also nurture emotionally, spiritually, and physically the beings that are coming the next generation. So if they can get to the women, that's powerful. And unfortunately, that's also another tool that's magnified in the last 40, 50 years that they've been utilizing. And they do this under the guise that, oh, we're promising you a fair, equal world, but really it makes no sense because at the top, it's always them, all right? It's a pyramid reality that we have lived in for centuries, all right? For a very, very long time. So what is this light at the end of the tunnel? I briefly touched on it, but when we practice having a connection to God, where we maintain a purity of the body, the mind, and the spirit, our intuition is sharp. And when our intuition becomes sharp, we are able to navigate through those difficult situations, because it's not about denying, like something happening to you, something bad happening to you or whatnot, or suffering, right? But it is about, again, as I mentioned, having the internal tools to navigate those times with grace. It's not easy, I will admit it. I go through those periods just like everybody else, always working through stuff. And through that process, I'm always wondering, how can I bring more clarity and well-being and joy into my life? Because I know that when I do that, I can share that with my child. And I can't tell it to her, I must live it. I must embody it. And that's the responsibility that we have for ourselves and the evolution of planet Earth and the ascension of planet Earth. We are responsible for that. The trick is to think that, the Pleiadians will come and help us, right? I ask Seven all the time, my guides, well, what about you guys? And they say, it's not like we can come down and lift you from where you're at. We can bring you tools, spiritual tools, rituals, ways of being and living that will heighten your ability to hear the word of Source God, to embody it, but we cannot do it for you, because that's the beauty of being on planet Earth. It is about growing, it is about ascending. However, to do this we must dive deep into these darker aspects of humanity and the darker aspects of ourselves. And but obviously we must have the right guidance to do that. And this is something that has been very difficult for many people because they've been wanting to do this work. They'll go to their church, their pastors, and sometimes they don't have the right leaders, spiritual leaders in their life. Sometimes they have people that are also possessed. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. These entities, they don't just possess and take over. These archons, they don't just possess and take over, people in the government. They also take over people in spiritual communities, whether they are of the church or the New Age community, okay? So we must be very, very vigilant. We must be very, very vigilant, because this is a time where they're ramping up their work because they're noticing, wow, a lot of people are gaining the tools and unplugging from this matrix and understanding what this is about, what Christ consciousness is about. No. We must eat, so we got to do what it takes. And so it is in a way a spiritual battle. And we are all spiritual warriors, okay? We all have the ability to do that. It's not like being a physical warrior where you got to go train and only some people have it. No, in the spiritual sense, we're all spiritual warriors, and we must be spiritual warriors because these entities work within us. They're like an army. I don't know if you sensed it, but I noticed it. It happened to me this weekend. There was a situation happening and I saw this army rush in, trying to really possess my mind and take over with this negativity. And not just that, but my body started reacting. I started tightening up and it was really intense, and I had to really, awaken my inner warrior and say, hey, I need your help. That's it. And I had to start doing the inner work. I had to become aware of this emotions taking over and sort of take myself off the ledge. And it wasn't easy. And that's why we need good powerful, strong, healthy communities around us, because we need those people around us that say, hey, I got you. I see what you're going through. And I know it's not easy, but I also see that the real you is hiding in fear right now. The real you, you know, your inner child and your inner teenager and your inner self is like, they're in fear as this army is starting to take over. But I know that you got it in you to wake up the inner warrior and to see the mitote, to see this army, to see that inner judge and stand up and say, hey, I see what you're doing here. I see that you're wanting to take over my frame. I see that you're wanting to take over my connection to my soul and my spirit, but I got it. I'm in charge here, okay? So I would like to go a little bit deeper into who these beings are in terms of the physical world that we're in right now, because I went deeper into the spiritual sense. However, I don't want to do it here on YouTube. So I've created a locals. I also have a Patreon, but I also have a locals. I'll have the link below. And I'll start to create there, especially on locals, like content that is more, that has less likely of a chance to be censored or demonetized or whatnot. But I want to hear your thoughts about your experience with this. I know a lot of people that are part of this community, you also have access to a lot of really good information and knowledge, okay? And there's a lot of good stuff here, and it's good that we are aware of it so that we can actually work, you know, to fight the enemy. We must be aware what the enemy is, right? And we are our worst enemy, because these entities, they work through us, every single individual. And you probably hear that sound out there. I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much. Check out the links below and check out other content that I'm making in relation to this and this awakening and ascension that is happening on planet Earth right now. Be blessed.